Oh, so now you're above the rules. That's what she snapped the second I told her I wasn't paying her made-up $25 fine. She puffed herself up like a small-town sheriff, clutching that clipboard like it was a badge. If attitude alone conferred authority, she'd have run the whole cul-de-sac by decree. But she wasn't a deputy. She was my neighbor, playing queen of the block and hoping I'd bow. The trouble started after I put up a clean, plain sign on my fence that faced the road. It wasn't loud or rude, just a property marker with my county lot number and a line clarifying that my home wasn't part of any association. It told the truth, and it did it without shouting. Somehow, that little rectangle of reflective letters managed to make someone very mad. Want to know the real spark? A bright orange tag taped across my trash bin handle one breezy morning by the lake. I stepped outside to grab the can and saw that screaming little square announcing a petty charge in bold letters. I actually froze, wallet halfway out of my back pocket out of sheer habit. You know that reflex to just pay something small to avoid hassle? I nearly did, but something in me caught. The amount wasn't the problem. The principle was. I've worked as a record specialist for years. Property files, deed restrictions, county records, the unglamorous paper bones of real estate. I don't claim to be a lawyer, but I understand the way jurisdiction works on paper and how it plays out in the real world. That orange tag didn't merely feel wrong. It stood on the wrong side of a legal line. I just couldn't yet say exactly why. Her name is Meline, early 50s. Walks like everything is her business, and she's late to correct it. She materialized in my bins with the urgency of an audit, rapped 3 hard knocks on my door, collector knocks, and announced, "Good morning, Evan. I'm here about your compliance with our community standards." I opened the door wider, honestly curious how far she'd go with this. She pointed past me toward the street. "That placard you put up is making the whole neighborhood look bad." She met my property marker, the one with the county lot number, and a line clarifying non-membership. The morning sun hit the reflective letters just right, making them impossible to miss from the sidewalk. "Unified appearance sounds nice," I said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice and mostly failing. "But the law doesn't actually say anything about pretty." Her expression tightened in that way people get when they're not used to being questioned. Her clipboard looked like violation notices were reproducing under the clip. She held it tight, like the way it gave her jurisdiction over people who'd never voted for her. "Do you realize this lot is completely beyond your HOA scope?" I asked, calm as I could manage. I was irritated, sure, but I didn't want a shouting match on my porch. I pointed to the numbers printed clearly on my sign. "This is County Designation 7849. This marker is on my private property line. It faces the road, so the number can be read from the sidewalk. Nothing excessive. I'm not under your HOA." Then I pulled a folder from the little shelf by my door. Inside, behind a neatly labeled tab, sat my original trash service agreement, dated 3 years before their HOA was even incorporated. This contract predates your association. I never joined, never signed, never paid dues. You can't regulate a property that isn't a member. The change in her face was small, but I saw it. The flat surprise when someone has paperwork ready. Most people probably just paid. My job taught me to keep every piece of paper in order, ready at a moment's notice. Agreements and jurisdictions aren't a suggestion. They're enforceable boundaries. Any judge would say the same. She straightened, then delivered her line like a flag planting. "Our policies apply to this entire neighborhood area." She waved her hand at the surrounding houses, like she was claiming the shoreline, the mailboxes, and the sky. That sentence hit me like a wrong note in a song I knew by heart. That's not how HOA jurisdiction works. Associations govern voluntary members within defined boundaries, properties that sign covenants and pay fees. They don't get to annex houses by gesture. I try to keep us from escalating. "Ma'am, that's not correct. HOA jurisdiction is limited to properties that consent to be governed by the covenants." But inside, a different thought was forming. If she was as sure about authority she didn't have, how many other things were wrong? She walked off toward her car like the matter was settled. I watched her go and understood something I hadn't faced head on yet. She'd probably never been challenged. Overreach had become habit. I stood there with the orange tag in my hand and decided that guessing wasn't enough. I needed confirmation. I dialed 311. Fumbled the numbers the first time. My fingers were shaking more than I liked. When someone answered, I laid it out simple. I need to know if a homeowners association can find a property that isn't in their association. Saying out loud made the absurdity hit harder. They transferred me to a county representative who sounded like this wasn't the first time she'd handled a neighborhood power struggle. She asked for my address and lot number. I read them off slowly, watching the lake and trying not to fill the silence with my own theories while she typed. 3 minutes felt like 30 when she came back. Her voice had the crisp certainty of a ruling. Sir, this lot is outside HOA boundaries. They have zero standing to charge your property. I leaned on the porch rail. It felt like a ref's whistle at the first play. Stopped the game. Ball's dead. Relief climbed through my ribs. I wasn't crazy to resist. This was never about $25. It was about someone claiming authority they didn't possess and believing I'd fold because it was easier. Just then my next-door neighbor came out, rolling her trash can back with the casual efficiency of someone who had somewhere to be. She's an accountant. Rebecca, everything all right? She called. I waved her over and told her what the county had confirmed. She listened like an auditor. Questions clean and precise. Then she ducked into her house. I heard paper shifting, a printer spitting, the quick shuffling of someone who knew where files lived. She came back with a spreadsheet and a couple of handwritten notes, setting them on my porch table like she was opening a case file. I've been wondering about their financial setup, she said, tapping a section of figures with her pen. Quarterly tonnage rebate requirements. She showed me a calculation that chilled me. If they count your property's waste toward their totals, their rebate percentage improves. If your property is removed as non-member, they lose ground. In other words, there might be money riding on the illusion that they govern me, a financial motive. HOA overreach isn't always about lawn height or mailbox color. Sometimes it's about dollars per ton. We went line by line while the afternoon sun crawled across the boards. Every number she circled, every date she cross-checked against my contract, pulled the picture into focus. This wasn't a clerical oops. It looked deliberate, organized, driven by the kind of pressure that makes people take shortcuts. By midweek, questions started circulating on the block. Not confrontational. Sly, testing questions that felt rehearsed. I heard there's some property dispute. A woman from 3 houses down said, smiling too carefully at my mailbox. The man walking his dog slowed, unusually long morning after morning. Hope you get your situation worked out, he'd say, while his eyes hinted he'd been fed a different version of the story. The messaging felt coordinated. Whisper campaigns are real. Someone wanted me to look unreasonable, hard-headed over a small fee, so people would side with the peacemaker role she'd assigned herself. Then I found a second tag. Pink this time. Wrong lot number printed bold as gospel. I laughed reflexively and then stopped. Humor curdled when I peeled it off and set it beside the orange one. 2 different incorrect lot numbers. Both wrong. Both official. Either incompetence had turned epidemic, or someone was trying to blur the record on purpose. My trash can sat clearly 8 feet from the curb, well inside my boundary line. Anyone with a public parcel map could have verified my lines in minutes. Yet here they were, tagging and mistagging like they were playing roulette with stickers. This feels like harassment, I said to nobody, walking back up my drive. Harassment by people without authority. I started documenting everything. Marker, notebook, photos, dates, weather, timestamps. I taped a running log inside the garage and snapped each label from multiple angles. By the end of the week, I had 3 tags on record, 3 wrong lot numbers, 3 attempts to build a paper trail out of smoke. That's when I called the non-emergency line. I didn't want lights and sirens. I wanted documentation on the right side of the law. The dispatcher listened carefully and agreed. Systematic mislabeling with false property information crossed from annoying into actionable. She opened a call. Rebecca came back that evening with more notes. Targeting someone repeatedly with incorrect information can be considered harassment, she said. She had pulled references about civil liability and potential remedies. Growing up, I never pictured the phrase civil liability becoming conversational. Now it felt like a seatbelt in a car skidding on ice. By the time Deputy Lucas Blake pulled up, the neighborhood hum had turned to low-grade buzz. He parked his patrol car where the whole street could see. Lights off, presence on. The message was steady and professional. We're not here to stir. We're here to set boundaries. He stepped out with a matter-of-fact confidence of someone who settled this debate a dozen times. I've reviewed your situation, he said, flipping through my documentation with calm efficiency. Let's establish legal boundaries. I read in my lot number from a county file and laughed at myself for being nervous. He noticed. Property law can feel intimidating, he said, pen scratching in his notepad. But here, the facts are straightforward. Homeowners associations only hold control over properties that voluntarily join and pay membership fees. They cannot impose rules on non-member properties. Any attempt to do so is a reach beyond their standing. He took time to explain the framework, consent, covenants, jurisdiction, the exact kind of clarity that keeps situations like this from turning into neighbor wars. We stood there on the lawn, and for the first time I felt the ground under my feet was solid and recognized as such. That's when Melline showed up, with two other board members flanking her like an entourage. No knock, no hello. They walked straight across the curb and onto my property. The deputy's expression changed just a shade. He pivoted to face them, and I could tell he'd been here before. Ma'am, step back to the public sidewalk, he said when she started talking over him. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a line reinforced by law. The two board members immediately complied, as they felt the boundary snap like a chalk line underfoot. Melline hesitated, then backed up. This is a private managed community, she protested, motioning grandly at the homes like she was presenting a showroom. We have the right to maintain standards. HOAs are not private rulers, the deputy answered, slow and patient, like a teacher correcting a myth. They are voluntary associations with limited scope. Claiming power you do not legally possess can bring serious civil liability. He said it loud enough for the cluster of neighbors to hear. I watched the three of them stand there on the sidewalk, like a band that had just lost its stage. Phones were out. People were filming. The deputy wrote his incident report with the same care he'd shown reading mine. This creates an official record, he said to me later. If it escalates, the documentation matters. You could feel the current shift. That weekend, Rebecca showed up with a laptop and a stack of printouts that turned my dining table into a pop-up audit. If they drop properties like yours in their waste collection count, their rebate falls by several percentage points, she said, highlighting figures that were starting to tell an ugly story. They got a direct financial motive to claim authority they don't have. She had pulled their public filings and county data, matching dates and totals with the precision of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The pattern was unmistakable across multiple reporting periods. They've been counting non-member properties to puff up their rebate qualification. It wasn't just overreach, it was fraud. Waste management rebate fraud. Organized and methodical. We were beyond one trash can and a $25 tag. We were in the territory of criminal exposure. I started treating our file like a case at work. Printing key pages, marking lines, arranging exhibits. The stack grew. Incorrect lot numbers. Harassment log. Deputy report. County confirmation. Public filings. Tonnage figures. It looked less like a neighborhood dispute and more like a prosecution's binder. What scares me most, I said after reading her calculations a third time, is what they'll do when they realize they're cornered. Rebecca closed her laptop and didn't sugarcoat it. Desperate people escalate. The night before the county inspection, I turned my kitchen table into a war room, laid out every tag, photograph, and note, sharpened two pencils like it was a test. It sounds silly, but ritual helps. Order calms the mind. Whatever morning brought, I want to know I'd done everything by the book. The inspector arrived in a reflective vest, tablet in one hand, clipboard in the other, and a county badge that left no room for debate about authority. He spoke with the measured calm of a man who knew his report might land on a judge's desk. He cross-referenced county maps with our stack of proof, and then took his own measurements with a laser tool, photographing boundaries from multiple angles. Based on county records and the documentation you provided, he said, tapping precise notes into his tablet, this property is definitively outside the HOA scope. He drafted a formal non-jurisdiction determination, a notice that says in plain terms, the association has no standing over my property. He pulled a yellow order with an embossed county seal from his clipboard. Even the paper felt official, thick, and textured. This will be posted in a visible spot, he said, and copies will be filed with the county clerk. The words sounded like closure. Deputy Blake arrived for the civil standby, parked where he could observe without interfering, his cruiser an anchor of authority. Neighbors gathered, whispering in clusters. You could feel the neighborhood balance shifting toward truth. That's when Meline came barreling down the street, papers flapping, moving faster than I'd ever seen her move. This is going to destroy our entire rebate system, she shouted, voice ragged. Panic was written across her face. We all heard it. The scheme we documented was seconds from being stamped into an official record. You don't understand the consequences, she cried, lunging forward. And then she did it. She snatched the yellow order right out of the inspector's hands and tore it. Paper ripped in sharp, ugly sound that seemed too loud for the quiet street. For a second, nobody moved. It was as if the entire block inhaled and forgot how to exhale. The inspector's voice came out level, edged with steel. Ma'am, you just committed misdemeanor interference with a government employee performing official duties. He said it like an equation that couldn't be argued. The deputy stepped forward. Neighbors murmured. Rebecca had appeared on my porch, eyes wide. Did she really just commit a crime in front of a uniformed officer? I asked out loud, stunned. They reposted the notice. The inspector finished his paperwork. The deputy documented the shredded pieces with methodical care. Photos, timestamps, witness names. The image of the official yellow order pressed cleanly over a flimsy HOA tag carried a symbolism I'll never forget. Bogus demand smothered by real law. And this time, everyone saw it. This report goes straight to the county attorney, Deputy Blake said as he closed his notebook. Interference with government employees is taken very seriously. His file was airtight. Even Rebecca, who is not easy to impress, leaned in and whispered, textbook accountability. Within 48 hours, the county attorney filed misdemeanor charges against Meline for obstructing a government employee. The complaint was clear, backed by multiple witnesses and sworn testimony. And that was just the start. The HOA now faced civil suits for systematic harassment and jurisdictional overreach. Their insurance carrier had to examine whether they covered board members acting far outside legal scope, a question that can lead to canceled policies and personal exposure. Word spread fast. People who kept neutral began asking real questions. Rebecca brought updates from colleagues in the accounting world. Their legal counsel was pushing to settle claims quickly. Their insurer was considering dropping coverage. Meanwhile, the state HOA Oversight Board opened an investigation into financial irregularities after receiving the county's report on the rebate scheme. The act of tearing that notice triggered mandatory reporting. She pulled the lever on her own downfall. One reckless burst of panic unraveled years of careful fraud faster than any lawsuit could have. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and stripped Meline of responsibilities within 2 days. Neighbors came back from that meeting, saying even board members looked stunned at the scale of abuse. The association sent written apologies to affected property owners and paused all enforcement activity pending the investigation. The audit uncovered jurisdiction violations across multiple non-member properties, leaving the HOA staring at heavy liability and the possibility of dissolution. For the first time in a long while, neighborhood meetings didn't feel like we were being talked down to. There was no smug confidence, just quiet and the scratch of pen signing off on apologies. County officials issued formal letters voiding all actions taken against non-member properties and set a clear precedent for future disputes. Educational bulletins went out across the region, reminding HOAs of their limits and the consequences of crossing them. It became a case study, how HOA overreach, once challenged, can collapse under the weight of real property law. A county representative called me later and said something that stuck. Your fight helped protect a lot of property owners. I won't pretend I didn't feel a quiet pride at that. My driveway turned into a line in the sand for people I'll never meet in neighborhoods I'll never visit. A week later, I opened a letter and read, "Case closed. HOA abuse documented. Jurisdiction clarified. The inspector's determination on file. The deputy's report complete. The county attorney's charges pending. And, most importantly, non-member properties shielded from attempts at control. My sign stayed up. So did my boundaries. I filed the last document into my neatly labeled folder and sat down at the kitchen table that had become a war room, a courtroom, and a classroom. 2 papers told the whole story. 1 bogus demand, ripped down. 1 official notice affirming property rights, posted where everyone could see. 1 neighbor learned the hard way that fake power can end in real criminal charges. And a whole community learned the difference between voluntary association rules and actual legal standing. I still feel that complicated mix. Anger at the audacity and relief that the law is sturdier than gossip. The lesson is simple and it applies to any neighborhood dispute. If you don't draw the line, someone else will cross it for you. Protect your homeowner rights. Know your property lines. Read your county records. Document everything. When you push back against HOA abuse of power with calm facts, clear documentation, and real legal backing, you're not just guarding your peace. You're helping set a precedent for your community. If you've ever had someone try to police your life like they own it, what would you have done? Would you have paid the small fine to avoid trouble, or called 311 and asked the facts? Drop a comment and tell me your take. Was this story satisfying, crazy, frustrating? Maybe all 3? If it resonated, hit like or tap. Thanks to support the channel. I'm building the space step by step with real homeowner stories about property rights, HOA overreach, neighborhood conflicts, and what it takes to stand your ground respectfully and lawfully. Guard your peace. Guard your yard. And remember, consent is a cornerstone of any association. The next story might just top this. Stay subscribed and keep those bells on.